we talk about parity and things being spread around. I'm looking at Georgia 1. I'm looking at Alabama 2. It's Georgia's first number 1 class since 2020.
Yeah, I believe so.
So what do you see? Let's go specifically on Kirby Smart's crew there, because they land the big flip of KJ Bolden from Florida State, to the Dogs. What else about this class was really big? They lose Dylan Raiola and still hold the number 1 class. What do you see in this group for the Bulldogs?
So Kirby Smart really just kind of hoarded all the good offensive linemen. He's like, I'm taking all these. The best ones will start. The ones who don't start will probably transfer out. That's the main thing that stands out to me is just the beef along the line of scrimmage for Georgia's class. I think Kirby Smart, he's very smart, pun intended here, to know that you can't really get very many elite big men in the transfer portal. And so he's going all after Chip, like all these big guys out of high school to see who will pan out. And that's the main thing that stands out to me. At quarterback, Georgia has Ryan Puglisi. They really like him a lot. In fact, I'm not going to say they won't miss Dylan Raiola because I think that's kind of crazy, but there is a real chance that Puglisi turns out to be pretty good for them. And I think they're pretty happy to have him. And then in the defensive secondary, as you mentioned, flipping KJ Bolden from Florida State, number 1 safety in the country, was huge. And I think getting Ellis Robinson, who's one of the best corners I've ever seen, to come in, I think he'll play early for them as well. So Georgia hanging on for another just elite class.
What about I did not look. Help me. Bud, come on and help me. Help Tom, help Danny, help the audience, help all of us. So it seems like Alabama, the superstar of the class was on from the beginning. We've been talking about Julian saying even on the Cover 3 podcast for a long time. But it was like enough work was done elsewhere. What went into the jump from number 4 to number 2? Like, who were some of the key prospects and the battles that Alabama was able to win? Maybe not at the very top of their board, but in a way that made that math out for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, so Chip, you mentioned it. First of all, they needed a couple teams ahead of them to falter a little bit, right? Florida did, Ohio State did a little bit, and then they needed to be able to pull off some flips. Not a whole lot of flips of like top 100 kids, but Bama did a great job today in that sort of like 100 to 300 range. They capitalized on some weakness, guys, Florida, Miami, a couple other SEC schools that they got a really nice running back from Miami to flip. So I think that's really where Alabama did most of their damage. They added to the quality depth of the class. We know the headliners in the class. You have a great pair of corners, and then you have obviously quarterback Julian Sayin, who we think is one of the most polished quarterbacks in a while. And if you're Alabama, I think you need him. Because I really didn't love the quarterbacks that Bama took the last cycle. So I think like saying come in there and play pretty early, man.
Yeah. So Ryan Williams had already been factored in. Ryan Williams was part of the 25 cycle, reclassifies to the 24 cycle. He was the number 1 wide receiver in that cycle. He's number 3 wide receiver in this cycle. He had already been factored in to get them to 4, right?
Right.
So this was all the other stuff that moved them up to number 2. Again,
and Georgia, Williams, has he signed yet, or is he still verbally? Because Auburn would like a word there for sure.
Auburn doesn't need any more elite wide receivers. That's ridiculous. That would be how many blue chip wide receivers would that be? Seriously, I don't have it off the top of my head. 4, 5?
Maybe 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have to spend on a transfer portal quarterback, you're going to have some money to throw around. So.
Hey, what did you think about Hugh Freeze saying he got pushed out of his comfort zone late last night trying to hold on to kids? Have you seen this press conference yet?
No, but I saw the quote.
Okay.
Good.
He looked exhausted. He looked like some assistant told him that he was going to have to play Fortnite with the kid until like 2 a.m. to be able to keep him. And he was like, we've got a special Christmas surprise coming up for the Cover 3 podcast. In it was a clip from our own Bud Elliott saying, I'm a grown man. I go outside when I'm done with my work. I don't play video games. Hugh Freeze was looking like he and you believed the same thing, and that he had just had to stay up till 2 a.m. playing Fortnite just to keep a kid. When he said, I got pushed out of my comfort zone, I understand how it reads, given it's Hugh Freeze and all. But what I saw from watching the press conference video clip is that he had just had to do some kid stuff, and he was not happy that he had to do it.
I mean, look, Hugh Freeze, I love any quotes that lack self-awareness from Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
Always. That's amazing.
Okay, so you mentioned Florida. So we hang on to DJ Lagway, right? Like just amidst all the chaos, hang on to McCray, right?
Yep. Held on to McCray. Yep.
Held on to McCray, but lost a lot else. Like where are we putting the pieces back together for Billy Napier?
I think there is some sort of, like, if you want to shoot the gap here, right, and see if you can just hit the straight, there is some chance that Florida really hits on their transfer class, right? That maybe LJ McCray is able to play some as a freshman to help spark Billy Napier's 2025 recruiting class. Hey, look, you got LJ McCray coming. He's going to be the starter more in 25 and 26. Probably that's their, like, really special talent quarterback that they have here in this class. They have Graham Mertz coming back. Maybe they have a nice season, right? And the transfer class is good enough to propel that nice season, and thus they don't have to fire Billy Napier. On the other hand, like, I know a lot of schools who continued to recruit LJ McCray up until signing day who did not believe they had a real shot to land LJ McCray. And they're like, we're going to do it because we know there's a pretty good chance Billy Napier gets fired next year, maybe mid-season.
Oh, you're putting in the early work.
Correct. Yeah. They're putting in that pre-work. We used to say in recruiting there was no prize for second place. Now times, like, there actually are prizes for second place.
Damn. What else about what can Florida's class still be excited about?
I mean, I honestly think it's the fact that you landed like 2 of the top 10 players in the country.
Yeah.
In like, Lagway is just a freak of freaks. The production this year finally matched the tools. They really didn't match it in 2022, but in 2023 on the field as a senior, he improved a whole lot. He was better on the field on Friday nights than he was at the Elite 11, and the guy's just a ridiculous athlete. And the same for McCray, right? Like, McCray was always a guy we were enamored with at camps, but ultimately not a guy who had crazy production throughout his high school career. And he kind of had that baby deer thing. It's like, that's a lot of body to coordinate. It's going to take a little bit of time to get going, man. And this year, it got going. So he started getting a lot of sacks, started being a total game wrecker. I think for Florida, it's those top 2 guys. Like, Billy Napier's staff, I think it's a really good recruiting staff. It's a really good scouting staff. It's just, the way they lost games this year, I think, inspired a lot of doubt among recruits. And I think it made them easy to recruit against in the negative fashion, which we see a lot throughout the country. But if you're messing up, the SEC will negatively recruit you pretty quick.
What about the new boys in the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma? What stands out about those classes?
So for Texas, they continue to load up on the lines of scrimmage. So Brandon Baker, we talked about him on Cover 3, I think 4 or 5 months ago when they actually landed his commitment over the summer. Just an elite level offensive tackle, one of the true offensive tackles in the country, and not many out there this year. This was not a great year for that offensive tackle position. So Baker coming in, I think, will be able to help them at least by year 2. Maybe he'll be able to play some as a freshman. And then receiver Ryan Wingo. They held off a late charge by Missouri and Nebraska, a guy who's from Missouri. Missouri obviously has really favorable NIL laws for the home state Tigers, and Texas was able to outlast them. Chip, Wingo's a guy, like, if they lose Xavier Worthy to the draft, which I think he's draft eligible, he almost has to be now at this point, I would expect Ryan Wingo to be able to step in and play immediately. And that's a guy, I look at his skill set, I'm like, okay, he's got the long speed, he's got enough size. He really has running back style skills after the catch. I'm like, you don't think Sark's going to find a way to get the ball in this guy's hands 3-4 times a game, even as a true freshman, to see what he can do? So I'm really excited to see what Ryan Wingo does for Texas. They did an excellent job. For Oklahoma, not quite as good of a job as Texas. Still a really nice class, though, that they put together. I think where they really helped out was they got some difference makers on the lines of scrimmage, especially that defensive line. We talked about it this year. We didn't see the difference makers for Oklahoma up front. There's a kid named David Stone. He's from Oklahoma. He played his high school ball at IMG Academy. That's a guy who I think could play early for them because he is polished, heavy hands, violent kid, good size. I think he'll be a very productive college player for Oklahoma. So I think if you're a Sooners fan, or especially a Texas fan, you have to be really excited about what you're bringing to that new league.
Xavier Worthy, draft eligible. So
okay,
there you go. Locked and loaded.
Boom.